And all dear friends here, I know today we have so many distinguished guests. We have the president from Guatemala, president from Bolivia and Ecuador. I must say I'm so honored to be part of this event. And during all those distinguished guests, you mentioned Taiwan several times. I must say why Taiwan can grow so well. That's because we have your support. That's because we also get a strong support for all like-minded countries. Just now, the two presidents also mentioned about Taiwan. Sometimes we didn't know Taiwan, what kind of products Taiwan produce, because maybe we didn't create a new brand, because Taiwan always played the key roles in the supply chain. So that's the reason why the people maybe didn't know what the products we produce. So just now, the two presidents, especially the president from Bolivia, mentioned about Foxconn and also TSMC. Just now, Anthony also mentioned. And if you can recall what had happened during the COVID, at that time, whole world, they are lacking of the chips. Of course, Taiwan is one of the major producers for the chips in the world. If we're talking about high advanced chips, Taiwan produced 90%. If we're talking about chips, generally, we produce 60%. I still remember during the COVID, a lot of people do not have the chips, but chips is very important. I give you one vivid example. If we're talking about cars, conventional cars, at least you need 500 chips. If we're talking about EV car, at least we need 2,000 chips. So we get the phone call from US, said, Taiwan, you need to produce the chips for the car. Taiwan answered the call and do it right away. Because Taiwan, we're always thinking that we are responsible stakeholder in the world. Taiwan is not Taiwan itself. Taiwan should be important part of the world. So we are trying to do that. Just now, the president also mentioned that in the past, we have so many good friends in Latin America and in Central America. We highly appreciate that. But during now, you see, we still have a very strong support from Paraguay, from Guatemala. We highly appreciate that. But we also want to raise up a question for all of you. If Taiwan still have more and more allies in this region, I can guarantee you this region will be more prosperous. This area will more stabilities. Just now, some speaker also mentioned about China. China expand their influence in this area. We also need to think what kind of the influence they bring to here, prosperity or another problem. I give you one vivid example. Not long ago, we know the Honduras. He used to have a very close relationship with Taiwan. Due to some reason, they switched the political recognition from Taiwan to Beijing. But now you see, Honduras produces a high quality of shrimp. Taiwan consumes a lot. We like seafood. We like the shrimp from Honduras. But not long ago, you see the news. Actually, they only can sell 1.2 million US dollars shrimp product to China due to some reason. But in the past, they sell a lot to Taiwan. So we always thinking that the big market in China or the financial aid from China, it can be real. But actually, we must say it's an illusion. Just last week, Guatemala is very famous for coffee beans. And you see, for what China do. What China do is, because Guatemala still maintain very close relationship with Taiwan. So China stopped those coffee beans, even academia, to export to China. But I must say Guatemala still have a very good friends in Taiwan. So our government, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Lin, right away, he mobilized all Taiwanese businessmen. We like coffee. We like Guatemala coffee. We like Central America's coffee. We buy a lot. Because friends, amongst friends, we need to support each other. So at the last, I want to say thank you so much for your support to Taiwan. If we united, if we uphold the principles of freedom and democracy, I believe that our economy, our trade will be prosperous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, before we move to session 2, I just want to recognize a few individuals we have with us in the audience, and recognize the Consul General of Japan, Mr. Kazuhiro Nakai. Ohio gozaimasu. Ambassador Volker Anding, who's a former German ambassador to Uruguay. Mayor George Vallejo, former mayor of North Miami Beach, is here with us. Mr. Mario Sacasa with the Beacon Council, I believe he's here also. And of course, we have Mayor Vince Lago, who will be participating in session 2 in a few minutes. But also, I'd like to introduce the members of the Latin American and Caribbean Presidential Mission, the board members. And we have Dr. Michael Lenigan from Miami-Dade College. And I guess that table is from Miami-Dade College. We have Margaret Sanchez, also one of our board members. John Dixon from DC. And of course, Olinda Salguero from Guatemala, who will be moderating session 2. So I'd like to call Margaret to introduce Olinda and the panelists for session 2.
Thank you, Marcos, and good morning to everyone. I love every single topic that it's been happening so far. Very nutritious in knowledge, and also hearing the solutions that we're able to provide to our society, and most importantly right now, our planet. What I like about this microphone is that it has so many various accents. It's multicultural. So thank you, and a big hug to everybody. And I am very proud to be part of this amazing group, the Latin America Presidential Mission. And I have the pleasure to welcome this important panel. The future of our generations, a strategic geopolitical green cooperation. The panel will address how economic freedom and cross-continental collaboration can accelerate innovation in green technology, environmental conservation, and climate change mitigation. Experts will explore the transformative potential of environmental cooperation between the Americas and the Indo-Pacific region, including Taiwan. Discussions will focus on how strategic partnerships in green initiatives can foster sustainable growth and strengthen bilateral relationships, with an emphasis on the role of innovative technologies and share knowledge in addressing in global environmental challenges. I would like to share with you that in December, I'll be graduating on my second degree on sustainable business management. So for me, this is a great topic, and I feel very greatly passionate. And the way we defined it is having sustainability for our future generations. So we are not even going to be here. So today we'll hear from those that finding solutions in how we can actually create a better world for the future of our planet and our societies. I would like to introduce our moderator, Olinda Salguero, and as I mention each one's names, please come forward. Olinda Salguero is the president of the Esquipulas Foundation of Guatemala, representative of Global Peace Foundation for Central America, and vice president of the Presidential Mission. She was the chief of staff at the Central American Integration System and was recognized in 2021, 2022, and 2023 by the Forbes magazine among the 100 powerful women in Central American and Dominican Republic. President Jamil Mahuad is the distinguished Ecuadorian politician who serves as the president of Ecuador and is a member of the Latin American Presidential Mission. Senior fellow at the Program on Negotiation, Harvard Law School, and lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the United States. Please welcome President Mahuad. Kiantar Betancourt is the president of Atenil S.A. in Paraguay, a company that develops and manages social development and sustainable production projects such as Chaco Vivo. Betancourt leads one of the largest private landholding and exploitation companies in Paraguay and spearheaded the RED, or REDD, plus initiatives for the company, with the second now being the largest RED plus project in Paraguay to date. Welcome. Marco Cerezo is the general manager of the Fundación para el Ecodesarrollo y la Conservación, Fundaeco, a Guatemalan environmental NGO. In this position, he has shaped the institution's vision of conservation efforts by working to support justice and sustainable development projects for the benefit of rural indigenous communities around national projected areas. Please welcome Marco Cerezo. Then we have the mayor of Coral Gables, Vince Lago, or may I say Vince or Vince? He is the mayor of Coral Gables, Florida, elected in April 2021. He is the youngest elected mayor in the city history. Prior to his election, Lago served as the city commissioner for 8 years. Thank you. And he also held the post of vice mayor from 2019 to 2021. Throughout the years, he has dedicated his time to South Florida civic and philanthropic causes, where he has held various leadership roles. Welcome. And I guess we're complete. All right. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this amazing strategic geopolitical green cooperation panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret, for that wonderful introduction to the panel and that generous words about each of us. With the protocol observed, I would like also to acknowledge John Dixon, from the board member of the Presidential Mission, also that is with us. And I would also want to acknowledge all the women that are with us today, because I think all the development issues, peace, democracy, integration, whatever we are talking about is with women, not without women, and there are really wonderful things happening in the region. We have the first president in Mexico, for example, ever, and we have here the president of Global Peace Women also. I want to acknowledge her presence. Also, Karen Aguilar, the director of Forest Carbon Initiatives at Fundaeco in Guatemala. Paola Isaac Barnaya, the Broward County also, for the Florida International Trade and Cultural Expo. So welcome and thank you for being with us. I think we just have a wonderful first session of that forest of opportunities, but we are talking about the forest now and more than that. So I would ask President and a good friend, Mawad from Ecuador, to open this discussion, to open this session with that perspective of that geopolitical global cooperation that we are talking about among the United States, Latin America, and Asia-Pacific region. So please, the floor is yours.
Let me tell you this story that will happen in 3 different acts. The first one happened in 1999 in a place called Yasuní in Ecuador, my country. 1 square kilometer in Yasuní has more biodiversity than the totality of the United States and Canada combined. It is considered the most diverse place in the world. I was president of Ecuador at that time and decided to protect that region from any kind of damage. Thank you. Thank you. So we created a concept that converted the Yasuní section in an intangible area. It was not a park, just a park. It was not a protected zone. This concept of intangibility was new to the world. Second, we said, well, we are not exploiting oil here. We are keeping the trees where they are. So we are selling oxygen to the world. And we would like to receive some compensation from developing countries because of this contribution we are doing. And we started a project to do that. That was another pioneer idea in the world. And third, we decided to ban any extractive activity in the zone, and only ecological tourism would be allowed there. And all that was going to be managed by the public sector, the government, and the local communities living there. So in those 3 aspects, the idea, the intangibility, the selling of the oxygen, and the process of managing the area were very innovative. The consequence, the World Wild Fund gave to the government of Ecuador the Gift to the Earth Award for this action that was inspired by Yolanda Cacabatze, Minister of Environmental Issues. This is Act 1. Act 2 happened in 2006 under the government of President Rafael Correa. Oil was discovered in that zone. The price of oil went to the sky, and he declared that poverty in the country was happening now, and we should not keep those resources for the future. And he decided to start extracting oil from that place, saying that with new technologies, you could come only to the limit of the park, and through subterranean pipes, you could extract the oil without affecting the surface. When you start doing that, you open roads, you bring people, they need where to live, they need where to eat, they need where to entertain, and you destroy the zone, of course. Not because you are doing things, but because you are allowing them to come to places where it was not possible before. So oil produced 3 contaminations. The contamination of the original idea, this sanctuary was desecrated. Second, the contamination of physical reality. And third, the contamination of the idea of working together with local communities. there were groups of nomads in that zone that were not contacted by people that were not from there. So that was the richness of the situation. The consequence, the production of oil in that part became a big, important income for the national government. So new, different, important interests started to play roles there. And then we come to the third act that happened last year, 2023. When the government started exploiting oil, a group of citizens presented a petition for a plebiscite. We wanted the people of Ecuador decide if they would like to protect the region or to extract oil. And never was processed. But last year, the Constitutional Tribunal took the dust off that petition and presented that for public decision. Very old question, more than a decade old, different circumstances in the world. And on top of that, they put this question to be voted the same day that we had general elections for the presidency, the vice presidency, and Congress. So this vital, important theme in the world was just one more part of the electoral campaign and had a very low level of analysis and discussion. And as we know in the world today, you can take for you years getting your education at universities, getting your master's degrees. Congratulations, Margaret, for your second degree. And getting your PhDs, years of study. But you can have the feeling of becoming an expert on any field in the world with 20 hours in social networks. So that became a vast ocean of information with 10 centimeters of profundity. And the people of Ecuador went and voted there. I would like to ask you to think how you should have voted in that moment. Because at that moment, oil prices were down. The oil production of the whole country, including in these fields, were down. Social programs to combat poverty, etc., were financed with those resources. So you had to choose between keeping the oil there and increasing the social conflict or getting some money and destroying nature for solving this problem. Okay, now, the debate was between the protectionists that said ban everything, period, and the extractionists that said, no, with modern techniques and systems and methods, you can control. You can make damage control, so you can get both. Between those that said, if you lose those primary forests, etc., you will never recover them, and those that said, you have to pay that price for development. Between those that said you can compensate the money you are losing for not extracting oil, and those that said you will never can get that. Okay, what is my conclusion, my personal conclusion? It was very hard for me, as for any other person that has served the country or the city or the county from a public position. You have to choose between two difficult, tyrannic options. And you have to sacrifice one of those in the service of others. We all have had that kind of decisions. So my first conclusion was, in personal terms, I am not in politics anymore since many years ago. to preserve biodiversity is a need, and it is impossible to debate that or to argue against that. So that is true. The first part of the phrase is real and true. Preservation has a value in its own. To compensate for the loss of the income with other means is a wishful thinking. In the state of the situation in the world right now, it is not possible to do that. And now, let me just show you a very brief comparison that will illustrate this point. I do that with a lot of respect because I am surrounded by experts here in this panel about these issues. I, after a lot of efforts, could graduate as a lawyer. So all these things are not my field. First thing, remember those times when you had to produce something to be next to the source of energy. You need to be next to the river because the mill was moved by the water of the river, or the windmill. So you had to bring the wheat there to be milled. Then we had in the history of humankind the Industrial Revolution, produced by the steam engine that changed everything, and international transport. So before we were using coal and then oil to produce energy, and we had to create a whole complex of connections from the moment you generate energy, let's say hydroelectric power, then you have to lower to make it possible to be transported to the houses, connected to the houses, and to allow you to press the button of the dishwasher to work. So a whole system of production and the grid to distribute that. And we were working with that, and came the problem of global warming. And the idea is you cannot get oil anymore as a good fuel. You have to substitute that, if possible, with electric energy, basically, or wind power, etc. Now, what were the advantages of oil? We can blame oil from many different points of view. But what are the merits of this source of energy? First, when you want to compare an barrel of oil, with a unit in wind power or a unit in electric power, you have to compare them. Otherwise, how can you measure apples with pears? So the caloric capacity of oil is enormous. Second, the price for doing that is rather cheap. It has ups and downs, but it's a price that the economy in the world is accustomed to pay. Third, the technology for extracting oil is called mature. It has been developed along many years. Four, you can get oil in many different places in the world. It's very ubiquitous. Then, as Director Chao was mentioning, that you can call Taiwan and say, produce these chips that we need immediately, and you can do it. The energy, in the case of oil or hydroelectric plants, you can get that on demand. You need more energy for tonight, you increase the production, you can control that. So it is easy to produce, and it is very easy to distribute. And you don't have to store it. Then we are planning now to do that same thing with electricity. What I think would be the good news and the bad news about that? The first one Yes, to produce energy, solar energy, is cheap. Actually, if you compare the caloric capacity of oil and solar, it is the equivalent of a barrel of oil at $34. And the oil is usually higher than that, so it's a very good business. Second, the technology is very mature as well. That's good news. Third, you cannot do that in as many places as you have in the world producing oil. You need to be in the right locations to get solar power. Then you cannot get that on demand. It is intermittent. It doesn't work at night. So how do you overcome that obstacle? You can store it. But here starts the bad news. I remember this man falling down from the top of the Empire State Building, and when he was going through the 5th floor, somebody on the window said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "So far, so good." So far, so good, yes. But you can store with enormous investment in lithium batteries. And the price is enormous. And then you have the grid, which is not good now, but it is organized to get the energy from the hydroelectric plants or thermal plants that were planted near the grid. Now you have to connect all these solar panels to the grid that is not ready or is not enough. And that is another enormous cost. So if you add these two elements, the price is going to be much higher than the price of barrel of oil. So it is more expensive. And what is something that I think is needed here? We are analyzing decarbonization from the demand side only. We need to cut the emission of these gases. So lower your consumption. All over the world, we do enormous efforts in our countries for doing that. But the whole South America produces 3% of the emissions in the world. And the whole Africa produces 3% of the emissions. And the European Union produces 20-something. And the whole Asia produces 30%, the whole Asia region. And one country produces the same 30%, the United States. So when you're calling the whole world to cut those emissions for the advantage of everybody, never lose from sight this reality. 30, 20-something. There is where you have to work. Second, as far as I know, and I can be wrong, nobody has really calculated the total cost of converting oil energy to green energy. What are the amount of investments that the economy of the world needs to produce this change? Not in rhetorical terms, not in wishful thinking, but in real terms. Nobody has done that. And somebody that tried, I think it was McKinsey, like $3 trillion just to prepare for that, to prepare the enablers of that thing. How much cobalt, lithium, et cetera, you need for batteries, cables, et cetera? How much energy are you going to consume to just produce those things? So we need to be very serious when you talk about these things. We need to distinguish the real problems from the good purposes that we all have about this. Where is the funding for that? if you calculate the amount, where is the funding? Where the funding will come from? What are the financial vehicles to use that? What is the market attitude to that? What will be the new regulations? Can you do that just by using what we have now in our hands? And then we have great opportunities coming with that. Regions in the world that have been considered useless, like the Sahara or the Atacama Desert in South America, or extensive fields in Australia, could be very productive because they are in the right places and have the good luck of a lot of sun energy. And what are we doing to analyze this problem, not only from the demand side, but from the supply side? I don't think we have a real effort to help those regions of the world to produce that. And that is a very concrete sector for cooperation. Then we can use that opportunity, thinking like countries from the underdeveloped world, for example. We need to observe, again, as you said, Director Chao, the chain value. Where can we insert ourselves? Which part would be advantageous? And then we need good luck, and we need smart actions. And I would like to finish highlighting these opportunities. I would like to bring more answers than questions, but I have much more questions than answers, to be realistic and honest with myself today. And maybe just a final thought. Instead of trying to stop the inevitable, why don't we try to be there when this will happen and take some of the benefits for us? Because when a dog is trying to chase rabbits, the dog doesn't follow the rabbit. He makes a calculation, a triangulation, and goes to a place where he will meet the rabbit in the future. That would be a good idea for us to think. What we need to do, where we need to be to get some advantage of this reality. Thank you very much.
Former president, a major, we have a representative from the private sector and also from the NGOs, civil society, so we are going to have a good discussion here. And by the way, I just want to mention that that voice and that intervention that is from the experience and from wisdom, I would say, of former President Mawad, Tuto, and President Cerezo, you have in your table many initiatives and the work that the presidential mission has been doing for more than a decade beyond ideologies. That is very important. So I will ask you to take a look after the event, but everything is there. Well, actually, you already mentioned some important questions. You focus on the perspective of the topic. I would like, because everything is also about leadership, no? And we have public representatives here. I would like to ask Major that is with us that, according to your experience, because you are now mayor, but you've been serving publicly for many years, and cities play a key role in development and climate change and sustainable development. So we would like to know your opinion and your perspective.
First off, thank you very much. Muchas gracias por darme el honor de estar con ustedes. Thank you for having me. How much time do I have to respect my colleagues? Okay. So first off, I think the president, it was an honor to witness his story along with the insight that he provided. An incredible story. And I didn't hear the end of what happened between the decision in regards to the vote. Was the land saved, or was the continued drilling moved forward? Okay. Well, what was the final outcome?
You can vote now.
Ah, okay, now you can vote. Good. Perfecto. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, which I think is important. One of the things that I've had the privilege as being the youngest elected mayor in the city's history is to change the paradigm of how we discuss sustainability. Sustainability and environmental stewardship. It's a beautiful, catchy word. You know, it's a concept that everybody loves to mention when you're running for office. I'm sustainable. I'm pro-environment. We gotta save the environment. We gotta add more trees, we gotta add more parks, we gotta do everything we possibly can to be as green as possible. You either you are or you aren't. I am the son of immigrants who came to this great country with nothing. They met in medical school in Tulane, where I was born. My grandfather was a physician in Cuba. He was Surgeon General in Cuba, served time in prison. My parents came here alone as a result of the Castro regime. They came during Pedro Pan. They spent a long time in this great country without their parents. But my grandfather and my father, besides being physicians, were always what we call guajiros. Do you know what a guajiro is? They love campesinos. They love being in the element of the environment. My father's a surgeon by day, but a campesino at heart. So we were raised, with fruit trees, with chickens, with, an understanding of orchids, an understanding of grafting trees, the importance of the environment. By the way, I'm also a Republican, and a very proud Republican. So I'll tell you this, and there's a reason why I mentioned that, because it's not about party politics. You're either for the environment or you don't stand with the environment. And I'll tell you why. I'm the first elected official, not only in the city of Coral Gables, but Miami-Dade County, to have my house run 100% on solar. I did it 8 years ago. I also have batteries on my house. I also am on my second electric car. That's another conversation, Mr. President, because I'm with you also. I think batteries are not the answer for the present or for the future. I think there's opportunities like hydro energy that are gonna be really revolutionary in the near future. It's already happening in Europe, and we're potentially over a decade behind Europe in regards to that matter. We're looking into it here in the city of Coral Gables. When I got elected, I decided, and I've done many of these symposiums, to really start working on issues of sustainability, true sustainability. So we wrote legislation in the city to attack issues that I feel that we can control. Because as the national government continues to fail us on many different fronts, I wanted to reduce taxes. I wanted to reduce dependency on government. I also have almost 100 employees. I'm an engineer by trade. I run multiple different businesses. I'm a builder. I build buildings and schools, but I also believe in the environment. Some of the laws that we've written have transcended what any other city in the state of Florida has done and have directly correlated into our success. Success that is tangible on multiple different fronts. First and foremost, you're either for the environment or you don't believe in the environment. So how do I attract those that do not believe in sustainability? I attract them with this. Your pocketbook. So if we look at the numbers, I save about $10,000 a year in between electricity, gas, tolls, and a few other things that I'm afforded to as a result of me putting solar on my house and driving a 100% electric car. My system paid itself off in 4.5 years. I am no longer a slave to FP&L or to any other entity. I just have to make sure I monitor my consumption. Like you said, it's all about your consumption. If you talk about finances, how do you lower costs as prices continue to rise? Insurance is rising, cost of construction is rising, maintenance, labor, everything is rising. Environmental stewardship is an example of how to reduce your costs. The city of Coral Gables right now has 65 parks. We're a Tree City USA. We have more trees planted in the soil than any other city. If you look at the way that my home is correlated, the trees in the front block the sun, in turn lowering my air conditioning consumption, reducing the stress on my building. Remember, I told you, I'm a Republican. Okay? And I repeat that over and over again because we have to break the narrative about party politics. The environment belongs to everyone. The environment especially belongs to my 2 daughters. Because one day we'll be gone. And what will be left is either a concrete jungle or a beautiful mosaic where we can enjoy and reap the benefits of investing in this community. Some of the things that I'll tell you really quick, because I don't want to take up more time, are the city of Coral Gables has the largest 100% electric car fleet of any city in the state of Florida, largest charging network of any city in the state of Florida, most robust lead ordinance of any city in the state of Florida. We have a parks program where for every permit that is paid, 0.5% goes into a trust, and millions of dollars are being reaped and put into that trust so we can buy open space. We've expanded over 15 open spaces in the last 10 years. These are just some of the legislation that I wrote myself. And we're also doing something that no other city's doing. If you believe or you don't believe in sea level rise, if you do or you don't believe environmental stewardship, remember what I told you. One day, somebody here in the city of Coral Gables, it won't be me, will have the opportunity to have a bank account, which in 25 years will have $100 million in cash for sea level rise, for infrastructure. We're putting away $4 million a year just in case if it comes. So my point is, the city of Coral Gables is the leader in regards to environmental stewardship, water quality testing, making sure that we're investing in the future. By investing in the environment, you're investing in your pocketbook. You just have to be patient. You have to understand that instead of ripping out the forest, which will benefit you for ecotourism, invest in that ecotourism, because in 10 or 15 years, it'll reap rewards tenfold, in my opinion. So thank you for allowing me the honor to be here. You know, if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk about anything that City Coral Gables is doing, we're more than welcome. But I'd also like to, make sure that everyone who wants to reach out to me can reach out to me because we're learning. I learn from other cities. I learn from our friends. For example, the Japanese consulate who's here, all the other consulates who are here, who are in the city of Coral Gables. We learn every single day by your leadership and by your ideas. So thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, alcalde Lago. Y lo hago en español, no solo porque me sale mejor que en el inglés, sino también como un reconocimiento, hablando de números, a esa minoría más grande en Estados Unidos del 20% de la comunidad hispana. Y creo que eso es algo muy importante para lo que estamos conversando en términos generales también. Muchísimas gracias por su intervención y por compartirnos esas diferentes perspectivas también desde el liderazgo público local. Well, in recent years, Pope Francis' encyclicas Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti have called humanity to look forward an ethical globalization, solidarity, and sustainable policies that call us, every one of us, it doesn't matter which sector we belong to. But as we are talking about if we believe or not in climate change, or if it is real or not, I think it is important, and I will ask Marco Cerezo. Marco is the director of Fundaeco, Eco-Development and Conservation Foundation in Guatemala. He's also the son of former President Cerezo. But I would like to know, Marco, your lecture about the strategic global situation, because probably we're talking what is going to happen the next 100 years, but we would also like to know what is happening now and what do we have to do, because we also have Kiantar, and we are going to hear his experience also in developing solutions in South America, especially in Paraguay. But we would like to have the huge umbrella of the ethical framework of this.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, first of all, to Tom for this invitation, this wonderful conversation. I think I learned many things. I think I was 23, and then the son of President Cerezo at the time, he was busy tackling the war in Central America and the war in Guatemala, striving for peace in the region. And I had the chance to go to NASA, to the Goddard Space Center at NASA. And at that time, the expression climate change didn't even exist. So the scientists at NASA showed us their models, they explained their models, and they said, this is what the models say is going to happen. Everything they told us that was going to happen, remember this was 35 years ago, everything they said was going to happen has already happened. And at that time they said, but beware, when Greenland starts melting, then you have to start getting really worried. Greenland started melting about 10 years ago. So I haven't gone back to NASA, but I'm scared of going back and seeing what these models are saying. And preparing for this meeting, I was looking at numbers of disasters in the US, and in the 2010s, the United States suffered 131 disasters, natural disasters, that caused losses for $978 billion. That includes hurricanes, storms, droughts, etc. In the 2020s, we're halfway in our 2020s, there have been 95 severe climate events that have already caused $568 billion in losses. So climate change, environmental degradation, environmental pollution are no longer an environmental problem. They are basically an economic problem. They're a problem of growth, they're a problem of well-being, they're a problem of sustainable livelihoods for many people in the planet. We have all seen what happened in southern Brazil recently, or the floods in Pakistan a few months back. So I think that we have to change our perspective, and as the presidential mission says, beyond ideology, look at how we can tackle these huge problems. Climate change is a global issue, and as it says here, we are stronger together. And I think the big challenge to tackle these problems is how we can unite forces, how the private sector, the public sector, and civil society can work together to build solutions to these very complex issues. And I think that, and maybe Kienter will talk a little bit about this also, but we are facing a very dire situation. Governments across the world have very limited fiscal resources. Many governments have huge deficits. Overseas development assistance is also very limited. And we know that the amount of resources that we need to tackle these issues will not be coming from overseas development assistance and will not be coming from governments, particularly in the South. And that's where market-based mechanisms come in. And I think that we have been working for the past 7 years now in developing carbon credit schemes, voluntary market carbon crediting schemes. We have provided 6 million carbon credits to the voluntary market over the past years. And that's just one example of a market-based mechanism that leverages private sector resources to tackle an environmental problem, to move resources from private investors and private companies seeking to offset their carbon footprint to make investments into the environment. But this type of market-based mechanisms can also be replicated. We are now talking about biodiversity offsets or biodiversity credits. We're also talking about plastic credits to tackle another global issue, which is plastic pollution. So I think that, again, beyond ideology, we stand stronger together if we unite these types of mechanisms that bring private funds into global solutions to the environmental problem. So I'll leave it at that and give the word back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you. Well, actually, you see, this is getting more interested every time. And Anthony and President Quiroga and all that have been talking have focused in some specific things. artificial intelligence. We have now, because we're always saying that Latin America, especially Central America and the Caribbean, we are the most vulnerable in face of the climate change. But now Marco has shown us that the United States also, and probably we are not paying attention to that. But if we think that together, the United States, Latin America, and Asia Pacific region, we represent more than the 75% of the global GDP, but also 70% of the population, we're talking about something really important. And despite all the problems we have in Latin America, I always like to think in Latin America as a solution region. That's why I will ask Kiantar, that is working very hard in a solution from the south in Paraguay around Chaco Vivo, and Munja is also here from Chaco Vivo initiative. But Kiantar, we would like to know more about what Marco was saying, those solutions, and how can we add value, and how can we make things that probably were not happening 10 years ago.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here and be able to share a little bit about our experience in developing one of the largest RED projects in South America. First, I'd like to start by maybe introducing Paraguay in the area where we work. Paraguay, about half of the country in the western side is occupied by the Chaco. The Grand Chaco covers Bolivia, parts of Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, and it is one of the most heavily deforested places on Earth. One of the themes that we've been seeing on the panel, and I think it's a really important theme, is this idea that conservationism or protecting the environment is anti-growth or is anti-progress, right? Especially in countries that are developing where you need jobs, where you have to create economic opportunities, right? Where there's a lot of criminality that exists because of the lack of economic opportunity. And I would say in our case in Ateneo, we own 300,000 hectares, which is about twice the size of greater Manhattan, right? So 300,000 hectares is a sizable piece of property. The deforestation in the Chaco is caused by the cattle industry, right? Is caused by the cattle industry. And for us, today, when we talk in 2024, that sounds not so great, right? But if we study the histories of the United States, of Europe, of Asia, of many of the developed countries in the world, many of their forests have already been destroyed 100 years ago. They were gone already. They've been put into productive use. And I think Paraguay, as it goes on its path of development, is just pursuing the exact same things that many other countries have done to try to maximize the economic value of their land, right? So one of the experiences, my predecessor before I came on as the president of the company had started a study on carbon credits. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. They started a study on carbon credits, and when we did the initial studies on carbon credits, because we were looking for opportunities, we have a permit to clear almost all of that forest to do cattle. We have a lot of pressure that even came in the past that the Paraguayan government was actually very supportive in the end, but there's a concept of latifundio, which is if you are not using your land productively in Latin America, many times that can make you a target for expropriations or for things of that nature because of the need to make all the land in the country productive. Thanks to the carbon market, there's another way now. When we did our initial studies, it was 25 cents a credit, right? Some academic study that I read recently said that the opportunity cost, the cost of a carbon credit needs to be $40 to offset what you would actually make if you just did a cattle ranch for 30 years. If you just cut down all the trees, put down grass, put some cows there, you would need the price to be $40. Today the price is 10. But we still, as a private company, took the decision when the price was at about $2, $3, just, let's see what's going to happen here. We think this is going to be an important trend. We think this is something that's going to continue to grow. And we made let's say a very large bet 3 years ago to start developing on about 200,000 hectares of our property, 2 different RED projects. The idea behind RED is the idea of trying to create economic opportunities that allow us to take better care of our natural resources, our natural capital. Right? I think when you put it in those terms, it starts to make a lot more sense. When we think about economic capital, we always think about good stewardship, managing your economic capital well, using those resources well, and in a way that it's not going to run out because then you become bankrupt. When we think about human capital, right? We think about how can we help our people to learn, to grow, to develop, to have the best opportunities. When we think about social capital, we think about how can we make stronger institutions, how can we honor, the things that have been created in the past, the ideas, governments, these things that we've created. And now I see a turn. I was recently in a conference in London, a very large Innovation Zero, very large conference. I was very inspired while I was there because there was a conversation about natural capital, because that's also limited, and it's also something that we should value. And it's not in the sense of, we have to have a very holistic, I believe, argument about it, right? When we have such great economic needs for the development for people, you have to measure that sometimes. There's always trade-offs, right? When we talk about oil, when we talk about energy, huge trade-offs going to batteries as well, and that's a very big conversation that we need to have, even in terms of the supply chains, how we get these minerals. Are these minerals mined in a way that's just or that's good for the local populations? Or is it just something that we're taking, because we'd like to be green where we are, but not green more holistically around the world? So I would say, one of our experience, and I've been so encouraged by this, and this really comes from the private sector as well, from the voluntary carbon market. I'm sure Marcos can share some of that experience as well, because they've much more experience and they've been working a longer time. But it's the effort from private companies, energy companies, commodity traders, right? Technology companies, saying that even though it's not part of our core business, for us, it's really important that we hit these objectives. We really want to try to change our supply chains. And all of that requires a tremendous amount of investment, a tremendous amount of work. But I've seen, let's say, trade winds that are very favorable, because now today I have, fifth generation cattlemen, right, that have tens of thousands of hectares permitted. There's no zero deforestation law that's going to stop that, but permitted. But that come to us and say, hey, how's it going with the carbon credits? Are you guys selling those? Because we'd like to maybe look for a different type of economic option for how we can do this type of work. And I think that that's been probably one of the most encouraging things for us, that as you see the voluntary carbon market start to develop, and I want to just tie this briefly just to wrap up the point here, but when you see this kind of economic model develop, you see technology companies, you see consumer products companies all around the world that are making this effort. And I think the link that's very key, right? The link that for me I see, and I've been privileged enough to be able to travel the world and go to Asia and go to Taiwan, go to South Korea, obviously being from the United States. And what I've seen there is that there's a lot of opportunity in the private sector, right? There's this big effort already that's happening on part of the private sector, and may it long continue, to try to make that effort where you're thinking about profit, but you're also thinking about the planet, and you're also thinking about the people that are working with, and then the stakeholders in the community. And what I'd like to finish by saying is that I think that finding the economic vehicles, right? The investment treaty point from before, actually, I thought was very interesting. Finding the economic vehicles so that the capital that exists in these developed countries can go and fund the type of efforts like a reforestation project, right? In Latin America, in Paraguay, or Guatemala, and maybe that's something that Taiwan. I recently talked with this Taiwan Green Industrial Alliance, and they were this is a group of private companies that are looking to how can we fund carbon work so that we can decarbonize for a lower price. And I would really encourage that type of investment or that type of thinking as a real win-win, because you can make a decent return on investment if you have a good carbon price, and you can also have great co-benefits and have great things that benefit the local communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiantar. Well, by allusion, I will come back in some minutes to decide, but by allusion, Marco, we would like to know a little bit more what is happening in Guatemala in all these kind of initiatives.
Well, very quickly, and this, again, we don't want to go into jargon, but basically the concept of avoided deforestation is that we protect a forest by protecting a certain amount of forests. We are avoiding the liberation of greenhouse gases that will happen if those forests are taken down. We do a calculation. I won't go into technicalities, but basically we transform the amount of forest we're protecting into tradable rights, carbon credits, which are sold in the market. This is not a theory anymore. The voluntary carbon market is around $4 billion right now, I believe. Kiantar might correct me. So this concept of tradable permits is evolving towards becoming a tool for the conservation of rainforest across the planet. Kiantar mentioned a word, co-benefits. This is not only about carbon. When we do a project that protects forests, we're also trying to benefit local communities, to provide sustainable livelihoods, to help protect very specific species that are endangered. So for instance, when you buy a carbon credit from the Red Plus project in Guatemala that Fundaeco manages, you're actually, for instance, sponsoring scholarships for rural girls, for rural indigenous girls. Why? Because these young girls are not finishing secondary school, they're being given into marriage very often, and by providing a scholarship, we make sure that they finish high school, that they look to be nurses or teachers. So co-benefits are a part of that, the value of that carbon credit. When you buy a carbon credit from our project, you're supporting the conservation of the jaguar or a tapir, or you're also protecting a very rare frog that only exists in that particular forest in Guatemala. So for instance, if you've traveled in Delta Airlines, you have probably benefited our project because Delta has bought carbon credits from our project to offset their emissions. That money that is paid by Delta in the carbon market goes to Fundaeco, it goes to the project, and it goes to sponsor the scholarships and to protect those rare species of orchids or frogs. So carbon credits are a tool. It's a market-based tool. It's not a donation. It's not a grant from the government. It's a market-based tool to support conservation in our countries. It's working. It's not a theory. And I would strongly suggest that when you travel or when you look for any particular product, you look for projects or products that are offsetting through this type of projects, because you're not only getting a high-quality product, but you're also supporting conservation across the planet.
Thank you, Marco. People, planet, partnerships, prosperity. I would like to ask Mayor Lago, according to all of this, we believe that leadership is very important, but we also want to build more bridges through the region, across the region. That is one of the objectives, by the way, of the presidential mission, political dialogue, intergenerational dialogue, and we are building a society of knowledge. So we would like to know some ideas from you about how to improve our communication and our alliances with the local power in the region.
Thank you very much. Well, I think the first and foremost thing that we must do is lead by example, correct? And we have to have tangible examples of what we have accomplished. So when you look at property values in the city of Coral Gables, you've probably read recently that some of the highest property values in the United States, and that we've surpassed Beverly Hills. Some people view that as a great thing. Some people view that as not so favorable. I think it's a good thing, because at least we're trending upward, which is important. But we talk to a lot of other communities that come to see us, and they want to understand how will we able to transition to really being an environmental steward. And all the credit goes to our exceptional team, which we have some of them back here today with us, the members of the city of Coral Gables, our employees. They do a great job. Thank you. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. There is a direct correlation, I say this when I have the opportunity to speak at these events, between property values and environmental stewardship. The more trees, the more green canopies, the more lushness, the more parks, again, it directly increases our property values. In turn, the city of Coral Gables, you probably are wondering, well, the city of Coral Gables probably has some of the highest taxes in Miami-Dade County. We have the second lowest millage rate for a full-service city in Miami-Dade County. We have the second lowest tax rate of any city in Miami-Dade County. And I plan this year, God willing, with the support of my commissioners, to try to lower it once again. Why do I do that? Because our property values this year went up 8.5%. Last year they went up 10%. We're very fiscally sound. But to make these bridges with other cities, we lead by example. What do? We, for example, write pieces of legislation, which I sponsored, which remove all costs for permitting if you install solar panels on your house or batteries. I was the first one to do it. I took advantage of it. Now we have the installation of the Tesla roofs here in the city of Coral Gables. You don't pay any permits when you come into the city, and we expedite your permit. When you talk about lead ordinances, a lot of other cities and the employees for the cities are sent to our city to understand, how do we capitalize? How do we get consensus from developers, like myself, I develop and I build for a living, because we're able to explain to them that in upfront costs may be a little heavier, a few percentage points, but in the long term, like I mentioned before, the dividends are amazing. The dividends are amazing. So it just takes an investment, it takes an understanding. Take the less road traveled. Make that investment now, even if it costs you more. Limit your debt. You don't have to bond out all these projects. Just put a budget together that is forecasting into the future and invest in stewardship. Invest in infrastructure that will lower your costs. And if you're willing to wait 5, 10, or 15 years, I've been in office 11 years. I would have never thought I'd be in office for 11 years. Not even my wife thought that. But like the president said, we're here and we serve at the privilege of this community. But it's amazing to see projects that we started 10 years ago, 11 years ago, now bearing fruit. What are those projects? We used to never have one park in the city, in the downtown. We only had one. That was Pond Circle Park. Now, when I'm done, we'll probably have about 8 parks in the downtown. We're bridging relationships with developers and saying, your building is going to be 10 stories. Why not build it 11, make the footprint of the city a little smaller, and give us a 10,000 square foot park? I did that with Publix. Took me 4 years. We're putting a 20,000 square foot park in the middle of downtown, which is going to have a beautiful, lush canopy, providing shade in the city in our downtown. We're going to have probably about 8 parks in our downtown when I'm done with my term here in the city of Coral Gables. Those are examples of bridges that we build, not only with other municipalities so they can learn what we're doing, but also with businesses, the private sector. Because like I mentioned to you in the beginning, and I harp on this over and over and over again, there is a lot of money in being green, a lot. By the way, I haven't been to a gas station and I can't remember how long. I just go there to buy gum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, actually, probably we are not aware that every single day we need 22 trees to breathe, each of us. So from Coral Gables, we had traveled to Yasuní, to Chaco, to the Mayan biosphere in Central America. So Latin America, in this prospective alliance among the United States, Asia Pacific, in Latin America, we have a lot of things to offer. So President Mawad, you open this conversation, and I will ask you please to close it. So please.
Thank you, Linda. In closing, first, thank you very much for the invitation to all the organizers for this great opportunity to meet, to share, to learn from other experiences. Congratulations for what you are doing. We need help to multiply that as much as possible in many, many places. I have to confess that I feel a lot of envy right now for being sitting next to a current mayor.
You were a mayor.
I was mayor of Quito for 6 years, and this is the most beautiful public position I had in my life. Mayors are always in touch with the people on the streets. You deal with practical problems, traffic, or potholes, or parks. Yeah, okay? So it is a beautiful work. When you become a president, you deal with policies, international policies. You cannot touch that. You are isolated from the people for security reasons. You need an entourage that protect you. So the envy is real. It's not just a word. And I want to use the opportunity. I would love come and visit to Miami, to visit you, and to hear from a mayor to a mayor your plans for your city. I would love to hear that, because I really appreciate what you are doing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And just closing, we had many, many good ideas here. Tuto Quiroga explained about the difference between being in power when you have a lost decade, not the whole decade, but half a decade, or being president when you have all the wind helping you to navigate. You have mentioned the trade-offs in your position between taxes and the money to protect things. In Ecuador, we had that. I owe you an answer to your question. But first, if you were Ecuadorians, how would you have voted in the plebiscite? So, extract or not extract? Who will extract oil? Well, may I assume that you will vote for protecting the forest? Okay, you are with the majority of the Ecuadorian people. The plebiscite won. Yeah. Yeah.
You restored my faith.
Yes, and so we have had these very good ideas, and thank you for the invitation. And let's find ways to cooperate in that kind of projects with more funding, with more ideas, and help us to do what Tuto suggested. If the lithium is in Bolivia, let's put the plants there. Don't bring the lithium to other places to be processed or elaborated. That will help the development of our part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As Nelson Mandela says, everything seems impossible till it's done. So I think we have many things to do together. So thank you, every one of you, and thank you all for being here with us. I think we're going to move forward in these objectives in United States, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. Thank you very much.